Well, yeah. but then if you did a study of bars in any given town, you say when a customer comes in, if you get them to buy 2 beers and then nail their ear to one of the tables, they probably won't leave. Welcome to Bad Voltage. This is Series 2, Episode 31 on Thursday, the 3rd of May, 2018.
It is. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. We have quite a show today. We are going to go for the telethon approach to Bad Voltage, where we are going to start now, and we're not going to stop recording until the actual end of the show. So there'll be no little drum rolls halfway through. And Jeremy, do you want to tell us why we're doing it this way?
We're doing this way because we are really only have one segment today, and it's going to be what Mr. Bacon has been referring to all day as a bumper news segment. And I will say I'm a little bit curious what the listeners think of this format. I know all three of us really enjoy doing the news. I think it's been an interesting exercise, but I'm curious what the listeners think, if they enjoyed as much as we do, or if they'd like to see some more structured segments more often or less often, or just generally speaking, what they think.
Yes, I agree. Now, the one thing I'm not sure how we're going to do is the "and now Bad Voltage" bit. Like, are you going to say it and then we'll have a weird silence for a second?
Let's do it. See how long, like Jeremy says it, and then we see how long we can stay silent before it feels uncomfortable.
Oh, that's a good idea. Let's try that. All right.
I'm just going to mute you both and leave the room.
Go on then. Go on.
And now, Bad Voltage.
I already hate this. I can't do this.
That was awful. Yeah.
I'm really bad at this. Right?
Silence really isn't golden.
No, it's terrible. Right, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure who said that.
News. Begin. Jono. All
right. So apparently Comcast, everybody's favorite cable provider, are bumping up some speeds for their subscribers. Now, this was presented in the press as Comcast are basically shitting on people who are trying to be cord cutters. And as the people who provide the cord, that's not massively surprising that they're trying to do something about this. But it's actually, in my mind, not as bad as it seems. What they're doing is Comcast are bumping up some of their speeds. So, for example, if you're on a 60 meg internet plan, you'll get bumped up to 150 meg. If you're on a 250 meg plan, you'll get bumped up to 400 meg. And the reason for this is that this happens to people who've already got their existing cable service. So it doesn't happen to the normal internet providers. So it sounds like this is an approach that Comcast are using to try to get people to stay on with their TV plans. But like I say, it was somewhat presented in the news as like Comcast are trying to clamp down on the cord cutters. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. What do you guys think about this? Is this fair for them to do this, or is this squeezing their customers? To
be completely fair, this one I did not see. You kind of snuck it in there. The contention here is that people are complaining that they only get 250 megs a second and aren't getting bumped to 400 because they don't have cable, and then have to suffer through a 250 meg per second connection.
It seems like the contention here is that Comcast are rewarding existing TV subscribers with the speed bumps, but they're not rewarding, just internet subscribers with the speed bumps.
I think what I've taken out of this news segment is how far broadband in the U.S. has finally come. I mean, I've worked at ISPs that only had a T1, which is 1.54 megs per second for those who aren't in telecom.
Yeah, but wasn't that like 20 years ago?
To be fair, it was a very long time ago.
Right.
So the fact that you can now get a 400 meg connection in your home is, I think, the real news here.
You really? I don't think it's that big of a deal, personally.
That's news. I mean, being somewhat facetious, but
I didn't realize that you were living in the past in Buffalo.
I only get 60 megs here.
You get 60 megs?
Down?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What about you, Langridge? What do you get in the People's Republic of Birmingham?
I forget exactly, but I've got a slightly weird connection. I'm with a company called Hyperoptic. So instead of it being available to everybody, it's only available to apartment blocks in the city. That's right, because we are the master race. No, it's only available to apartment blocks in big cities. And what you do is, if enough people in a given block say we're prepared to be Hyperoptic subscribers, they come around and put a box in the basement of the building, and then they run cable to everyone's place from the box, and so you get way faster than is available to, peons.
Is it shared at the D-Slam then, or do you have a dedicated amount of bandwidth?
I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's faster than I can get from something like BT Infinity, which is fibre.
Okay. So it's pretty fast then.
So I'm just like, okay, fine, loads of bandwidth, I'm fine. At this point, I'm not bottlenecking on my internet connection for almost anything. Okay. So I'm basically cool with it.
So I guess to reel it back into the actual news item here, I am unsurprised that a company predicated on you not cutting your cable is giving a discount to people not cutting the cable. I think bundling of services is a pretty accepted practice here in the U.S. I don't know how accepted it is outside of the U.S.
Right.
Out of all the crappy things Comcast is doing, this doesn't seem like one of them.
It does feel slightly like, obviously I'm not a Comcast subscriber, but I've spoken to a bunch of people who are, and you do get the impression that instead of upgrading their network, if they took a tenth of the money they spent on that and spent it on customer service instead, maybe everyone would be
money well spent.
But as far as I can tell, the big difference between, we've talked about this before, the big difference between your market and almost everyone else's is that Comcast are essentially a monopoly provider in all the areas that they're in. So they don't have to be good at customer service because you've got no choice. Whereas everywhere else, it's not like that.
That's not really true. You've got lots of options in terms of broadband providers. I mean, like where I am, I have like 5 or 10 different options.
Oh my God, really? Where you are? 10 miles from San Francisco is really good at technology? That's remarkable.
No, to be fair, I get your point, but I live out in the East Bay. I mean, I could understand if I was living in San Francisco in Mountain View, but as far as the world is concerned, we live out in the sticks. And people have options. It's not like the only option in town is Comcast. Now, in some rural parts of the country, you may only have one option, Comcast or someone else. I get that, right? And
to be clear, this Comcast thing is rolling out to select customers in Houston, Oregon, and Washington.
Yes. Yeah.
Not everywhere.
Not everywhere. Yeah.
So I don't know, but that I think it certainly feels like the US ISP market is, at least in quite a lot of areas, a series of local monopolies rather than.
Yeah,
their argument is that they really do have competitors, and that direct Dish TV is a competitor, even though it's not cable. Whether you believe that argument is up to you.
Yeah. No, I should tell you a little story about British Telecom here in the UK. I might have told you this story before. I used to be a BT subscriber before I moved house, and so I had their broadband internet, but I didn't have the television stuff because I don't care. Never turn the telly on, right? And they would ring me up and try and upsell me on the TV stuff. And I'd say, I don't want your TV thing. I don't want you to send me a box. I'm not interested in it. Don't send it to me. One day they rang up and they said, okay, so you're currently paying, I think it was £20 for a month for broadband. And they said, but we can do you the same broadband deal and the TV for £19 a month. And I said, but I don't want the TV. I'm never going to turn it on. And if you send me a box, at some point I'll have to send it back to you or something. I don't care. I'll pay the £1 just to make you go away. Leave me alone. And the person on the other end of the phone could not understand. They're like, no, I think maybe you misheard. You get everything you get and TV for less money. So you can't possibly not want this deal.
Yeah.
That's very consistent here in the US.
And to be fair,
if you don't get phone on if you have cable and internet from the same company and you don't get phone, it's $20 more.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. And to be fair, that psychological trick that they play with that, but with the bundling, does work on most people.
Yes.
It just doesn't work on you. And it doesn't work on me either. I've never, well, I don't think we've ever.
So I having worked at a bunch of telecoms, I think the genesis of this is that there was a research study done way back in the day in the late 90s after the deregulation that basically said if you had 3 services, the likelihood of that customer leaving was way less. So I think everyone wants you to have 3 services.
Well, yeah. But then if you did a study of bars in any given town, you say when a customer comes in, if you get them to buy 2 beers and then nail their ear to one of the tables, they probably won't leave. And so every bar goes out and buys.
I'm not testing to veracity of said study or to the odd interpretation of the bundling that has resulted. I just, having been through it as part of the time, arguing with our marketing department at the time. I believe where it came from.
I do have a certain amount of sympathy for broadband internet providers here a little bit, because it is hard to differentiate. One of the things that I'd like to see, I've gone on about this to mobile companies before, I think mobile carriers can genuinely differentiate themselves. They can be more than just a dumb pipe by being a smart pipe that offers other stuff. Rather than doing upselling services, they already have a customer relationship, right? So they could do things like pay for stuff really easily on your mobile bill, trivially, but they can't get it together to do it. But if you're a broadband internet provider, it's much harder to do that kind of differentiation. And so I have a certain amount of sympathy for how they don't want to be dumb pipes, but they don't know how to be smart. And therefore what they do is upsell you on television because they've got a cable coming into your house.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, the thing is, as well as just going back to a point that you made earlier, Ak, about their customer service being not great. I actually think that that's not the problem with companies like Comcast. I remember railing on Comcast a little while ago about when they kept trying to sell me business class internet, which I already had, and they kept calling me over and over and over again. And at one point, I asked them to take me off the call list, and they said we can't do that just in case you're accidentally taken off the call list, which is ridiculous. Anyway, I think the problem with these companies isn't so much that the customer service is terrible. I think the individual agents are generally, look, a lot of agents on customer service teams are frankly drones. They're reading a script, right, and they go through their motions. I think it's that these companies are not. Like, the left hand can't talk to the right hand. Now, that's a component of customer service, but I think it's that they're poorly managed is the problem here.
Yeah, no, that's fair comment. Most people, when you talk to customer service agents, yes, occasionally you run into someone who's a job's worth, but most of the time it's kind of, I'd like to help you, but nothing I can do about it. Sorry, computer says no.
Computer says no.
I think it's also a case of, like, Comcast has, 25 million subscribers? Turns out if you have 25 million people subscribing to a service, some of them are unhappy and complain.
Yes.
So if you have the most subscribers, you probably also have the most people complaining.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a reasonable point. Okay,
I think we should spend the whole show talking about Comcast. What do you think?
Let's not.
Right, okay, new thing. Georgia, the state of Georgia in the US, have attempted to pass a bill to legalise hacking back. Now, we talked about this.
We did.
In a past show, but this is someone actually tried. They're trying to pass Senate Bill 315, which criminalises hacking, but it provides an exemption for, quote, cybersecurity active defence measures that are designed to prevent or detect unauthorised computer access. Now, Microsoft and Google, unlikely bed partners here, have unified. They've written a letter to the Attorney General or whoever it is of Georgia to say, basically, don't do this. Right? It says hacking back is controversial within cybersecurity circles, which is an understatement as far as I can tell. But they say, before Georgia endorses the Hackback Authority, it should have a much more thorough understanding of the ramifications of such a policy. Provisions such as these could easily lead to abuse and be deployed for anti-competitive, not protective purposes. And you've got to ask yourself, if Microsoft's legal team call you out for being anti-competitive, just how far from the pack have you strayed? Right? I thought it was interesting that, first of all, you've got... We're seeing increasingly kind of the big tech firms tend to come together a bit to call out this kind of legal change. And I wondered, Jeremy, you talked about legal overreach and misunderstanding of technology in drafting of laws. Does this seem like another example?
It would appear so. It seems like pretty much everyone I've seen has come out against this, from the EFF to, as you said, Google and Microsoft. It seems like one of those bills that, to someone whose best understanding of technology is NCIS or something, a good idea, because 3 people will pound on a keyboard and it will route little beams through a cable right to the hacker's house, and the cops will bust down the door.
Is that not how it works?
Yeah, exactly.
But now you see, what you've got there, it's one person pounding on 3 separate keyboards, in my understanding of NCIS.
There's going to be a 3D tunnel, right, at some point.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I thought for some reason that we had discussed this exact bill previously and it was squashed, but how it's coming back up again, I'm not sure. I didn't.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of the concerning things is pretty much all the big tech companies came out against the net neutrality changes. You know?
Did what?
The net neutrality vote, the Ajit Pal and the FCC did.
Oh.
And it didn't actually make that much of a difference there, right?
No.
So, you know.
Why does that lobbying not work? And other lobbying does work.
Because the people lobbying on the other side have more money.
Right. But you'd imagine that these big tech companies would have quite a bit of money and be able to use it quite well.
They have quite a bit of money, but they don't have as much history using that money effectively to...
That's true.
I
guess they don't
lobby.
have the relationships and the clout in Washington.
Right.
So
they're increasingly starting to move in that direction, especially Facebook and Google. Microsoft previously had done so, but...
Certainly Facebook is spending a lot of time in Washington at the moment, yes.
Yeah.
Did you watch his testimony, by the way?
I did.
Did you watch it?
Part of it,
It was weird. I don't want to, given how much in the press we've been reading about comics making, insults about people's appearances, I don't want to insult. I'm not a comic, obviously, but I don't want to insult Mark Zuckerberg's appearance.
And she didn't say a word about her appearance either, but carry on.
Yeah, Stuart, are you look, insulting someone's eyeliner is insulting their appearance, okay?
It wasn't an insult.
I'm joking. I know it's ridiculous. I think it's fucking stupid.
Carry on.
But Zuckerberg has forgotten how to smile. I mean, the smiling...
He's just not a good public speaker at all.
No.
It's actually I don't know why he should not be on stage at F8. It should be somebody else. Yeah, that was the most awkward keynote especially where he paused for either applause or a laugh at the one point, and it was just crickets. Then it made him even more awkward. He's
got no idea. I mean, I thought Musk was a bad public speaker. He's very inspirational in the sorts of stuff that he does, but when he actually does public announcements, he's really not very good at it. Right. But Zuckerberg's quite a lot worse. Do you hear the hilarious thing about the Parliament here? Zuckerberg was summoned to speak in front of Congress, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And Parliament here said, "We want you to come and talk," and he went, "I don't have to, right? I don't belong to you. I'm going to send some random person from the London office." And they went, "Okay, but if you just carry on and refuse like that, next time you come to England, we'll arrest you and make you speak in front of Parliament." They're mulling over whether to do that at the moment. I think that would be hilarious if you just can't come to the UK anymore.
Now, I know you don't like Facebook, but I know that you are a warrior for individual freedoms. Do you think that's okay to arrest a citizen and force them to speak to the government?
Yes. Why? For the same reason that if you're summoned to appear in court, you can't just go, "I'm not going to show up."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that right, Mr. Langridge?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to get that clear.
Am I missing something here? If you're honestly of the opinion that someone summoned to appear in court can just elect not to show up without penalty, then we differ on this.
But to be fair, isn't there a difference here? I mean, if you're going to court, it's because the authorities have suspected you of some kind of fixed crime of some description, right? And
that's what they're trying to establish.
I guess I see a point here. I mean, I take it back. You're right. Yeah,
it's a bigger court, but yes,
yeah. So this actually segues to one of my news items.
Yeah,
let's do it.
And so I've kind of broadly structured these into Facebook-y related items. So one, after all this being embroiled in massive controversy, they released their earnings, and their first quarter revenue rose 49% to almost $12 billion.
Yeah.
Pretty handily beating the average analyst projection. And so that is shocking to me. Almost 1.45 billion daily users. And amidst all this controversy at F8, they launched a dating site or dating feature, which absolutely stuns me. I don't know if either you know Dwayne O'Brien. He used to work at Facebook. He's at Indeed now.
Yeah.
He said, I'll say this. It really takes some gusto to stand up in the middle of what Facebook's dealing with and announce that you're launching a dating service. So it's, I think it's a big deal for a couple reasons. A, it shows how little they care about any of the recent controversy that they've been going through, right?
Hang on. Before you go on,
yeah,
am I missing something here? I'm not denying any of the controversy. It's ridiculous what's happened with Facebook, but I don't understand they're a business. They're continuing to build and release products, right? Like, what has a dating site got to do with it?
So it's a big deal for multiple reasons. Why I think it's interesting that you would announce it now is I don't know of a service that has access to more intimate data than a dating service. So in the middle of a time period where you're being heavily scrutinized for the way you treated people's data, to launch a service 100% reliant on people's data and their personal graph, I think it's bold. Gusto is the correct word.
Yeah, but that's what Facebook do. I mean, that's what they're in the business of doing.
Sure, but they're amping it up, I think, one level.
The opposite of that is them not being in the business of doing that. I mean, they're not going to shut the business down because of this controversy. They're going to have to figure out a way to move forward, right?
The opposite of announcing something isn't shutting down. It's not announcing it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, it sounds like your argument is that because Facebook are in this controversy right now, as it pertains to the use and the stewardship of personal data, therefore them announcing another service that is based around personal data is in poor taste. And what I'm saying is, because they're in the business of stewarding personal data, why wouldn't they continue to announce products and services? I don't see
why would they not choose to launch a service predicated on that stewardship in the middle of the controversy? Yeah, but, it seems like a poor business decision.
I'm with Jeremy on this. I mean, yeah, okay, fine. I take Jono's point that, violating people's privacy in order to make money is what Facebook do, and therefore they shouldn't stop doing that. Fine. Sure. But I think
that's not what I said, by the way. That is not what I said at all.
Okay. But they could have been a bit more careful with the timing of announcing this, perhaps,
How could they maybe... all right, let's assume...
Do it 12 months from now.
Let's assume...
4 months from now, given current news cycles.
All right, so there's all this stuff going on with this controversy. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that we're going to allow Facebook to continue to work on products and services that benefit their business, right? That they're going to continue as a business. So we're not saying that they can't stop releasing stuff. When is the right time for them to release that dating service?
Maybe not in the same week that Zuckerberg's getting subpoenaed by Congress about the exact issue at hand.
Yeah, if they'd have done this 12 months ago, right, then I think people would have gone, another Facebook thing. But when they're explicitly front page news in all the newspapers and people are worrying about it, maybe that's not the right time to go, no, actually, we're doing more of that.
So I don't even think, to be clear, before we waste too much time on this, I don't even think this is the interesting part about it. I just think it shows you how little they actually care about your privacy.
Yeah.
What I think is more interesting from a Facebook perspective, they clearly don't care about your privacy. I don't know how else to make it clear. If the last 10 years of their action doesn't make that clear, I'm not going to make it clear during this segment.
I think there is in my mind, there is a difference between someone not caring about your privacy and somebody not being responsible in handling your privacy.
They actively don't care.
I think it's fair to say that Facebook I think it's categorically fair to say and proven that Facebook have not been responsible in handling people's privacy, right? There's no doubt about that. I think we'd all agree on that. Whether or not they actually care about your privacy, I don't know if
I think Zuckerberg's initial messaging, when he was being honest and open before it was $1 billion business, is quite clear what he thinks about privacy.
Yeah, but
that he can say other things now is fine. But I think when large corporations form like this around personas, and you see this with Google, you see it with Amazon. Amazon is built like Bezos wants it built because that's the cult of personality that they came up with. Google is very much to this day still Brin and Page. Facebook is very much Zuckerberg, and that's Zuckerberg's personality. That's always going to come through. No, it's never not to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of Conway's Law extended 1 degree. So they don't care. Accept it and move on, or don't accept it. But I don't even know that it's arguable at this point.
Jono, bear with me. Because it feels to me like your description is more of a counsel of despair than Jono's is, than Jeremy's is. Well, Jeremy's saying Facebook don't care about your privacy. What you're saying, as far as I can tell, is they do care. They're just really, 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 really bad at caring.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I do not believe for a moment that intrinsically in the culture of Facebook that they don't actually care. I don't believe that they're going to work saying, fuck it, whatever. Who gives a shit what's going to happen to our users' data and privacy? I don't believe that for a second. I think that's naive. However, I do believe that they go to work and they say, we deeply care about our users' privacy and we deeply care about their data. But they're really bad at actually doing about putting the necessary provisions in place.
There's no way, absolutely no way, that many super hyper intelligent people were that bad at their jobs. They built the platform with a specific enablement in mind, and now do some people there care? Absolutely. You're seeing some people quit and step down and all kinds of things. I think, do some people not realize the behemoth that was created? Sure. Does every person at Facebook ill-intentioned? Absolutely not. I mean, I know a ton of people. They're all really smart people doing really good work and are good at what they do. But I think from a very high level, not at the individual employee level, the company was built with a certain mentality around privacy, and that comes through all these years later in how things are done there. Now that they're making $11 billion a quarter, do they care about privacy because they're going to lose money if they don't? Yeah, but that's a different driver.
That's fair. I mean, to me, it feels like, imagine a 1990s, early 2000s Microsoft, right? And we said, how do Microsoft feel about openness? And the answer would have been, you could argue about whether they don't care about it or whether they systematically undervalue it or whether they deliberately go into work twirling their black moustaches in order to work out ways to violate the whole concept of it. But the output is the same. I think. I think I would say Facebook systematically undervalue the value of people's privacy. So I'm sure in every discussion it comes up. I think if you didn't care, when you had a discussion about we're going to do this new thing, no one would even say, but what if people feel disquieted by this? I think that comes up and then they go, well, people might feel disquieted about it, but we'll just put some good messaging around it and look how much money we'll make, and therefore we should do it. I don't know whether that's not caring or whether
I think the memo that got leaked a while ago, where they, a very high up person at the company made clear that they value connecting people over all other things, and all other things includes privacy at a very fundamental level. So what I think through their well-intentioned desire to connect people as much as possible, they viewed privacy as security, and privacy are also viewed as a barrier, and barriers get torn down when they are seen as barriers.
Yeah, that's fair.
I actually think that we're kind of talking about the same thing here, because I think the thing that I was challenging here is this notion of not caring. But I think that what we're really talking about here is their priorities, right? So the one thing I would agree with you, Jeremy, is that I don't deny the fact that, first of all, I think their priorities of connecting users that's unquestioned. And secondly, I don't believe that they value or that they prioritize the protection around privacy in the same way that I think a lot of people would like to. And part of that is, honestly, I think that is definitely Zuckerberg's personality. And I agree with you, Jeremy. There's going to be thousands of people at Facebook who are frankly given their marching orders. It's not necessarily that they'd want to operate it themselves. But I think that I think the other thing as well is that the landscape around privacy is changing, right? It's adjusting, and they haven't kept up with it. Like, people, I think, care more about their personal information now than they did 5 years ago, because it's become a much more hot button topic, and Facebook haven't adapted to that timeline as well. Is the other thing. Anyway.
So here's why I actually think this is a big deal now that we got this rambliness out of the way.
Yes.
I think this is a dramatic shift in the fundamental business methodology behind Facebook as a company, because I think it's going to obviously cause big problems for existing dating sites. Like Match's stock is down well over 20%, but this is, I think, the beginning of the change in strategy from where they were to more of an Amazon-like vertical strategy, right? Instead of being an infrastructure piece where they said, hey, come build your platform on top of the Facebook platform. This is them building the platforms themselves. So if I were anyone building a consumer-faced business that relies on a graph, for lack of a better, kind of net, I'd be pretty worried that Facebook is going to kind of jump in, especially if you are using Facebook Auth or Facebook Ads, because then they know how popular you are, and you are the first one they're going to come after, because they have very good data knowing which apps are popular, which verticals are popular, which areas are popular. And they kind of did this before with events and groups a little bit, but this is really the first time that they came out so strong in a vertical. And what's fascinating to me is they did it at F8, right? They didn't do it at a consumer conference. They didn't do it at an end user conference. They did it at their developer conference. And as a platform developer, what they basically said is, look at the awesome thing we built on our platform that because of the recent API changes, you definitely couldn't build yourself.
Yes.
And that's a marked change in their strategy.
That really is interesting. Yes, they've made that switch. So now I think there are a whole bunch of people who might have been at F8, but are certainly sitting home in running their company or their startup, and their exit strategy was get bought by Facebook. And now you might find it's Facebook build the thing that we're building. And now we don't have an exit strategy anymore. And before you were okay with that, because Facebook didn't build things. As you say, they built a platform, they built an ecosystem with the idea that other people would build stuff on top of it, and that would push Facebook stuff. But if they're now in the business of building things themselves, I don't know, whether this may not be a wholesale swing to a different strategy. It might basically be a one-off, right? Find singles also don't give a shit about privacy in your area, and that's it. But I don't know whether it'd be interesting to see whether they do more of this kind of thing, because you can imagine them also deciding to wipe out Eventbrite if they wanted to.
I don't think this is anything particularly new for them, honestly. I think, yes, they built a platform, and then they have encouraged people to build applications that run on the platform, and they've been fairly successful with that, some would argue. But Facebook have been baking more and more and more into their core platform for years. I mean, they've done this with events, they've done this with media, they've done this with photo sharing, they've done this with selling items locally. I don't see anything particularly new about this. What I think is different is them announcing it at FA, in my mind. The only reason why they announced it at FA is so they can try and get some quote-unquote good press out there that Facebook are doing something interesting, that they're not a lost cause. Because that to me is a silly venue to announce a dating service.
So I think the events was way more built into the platform. It wasn't a layered vertical service on top of the platform. It was part of the core of what Facebook was. I think with Marketplace, they were testing the waters here, but you could build what they did with Marketplace yourself using their APIs. Like I said, what I think the difference is here is you could not build this service as a third party. Everything else they've done, it was either a core part of the service, not a vertical, or you could build it yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just looking at Facebook now, right? I mean, aside from events, and now they've got dating, they've integrated into it fundraisers. They've obviously got pages. They've integrated in gaming videos, the marketplace, jobs, buy and sell groups, recommendations, instant messaging with Messenger. Like, to me, these are all arguably verticals that they've broken out into, and they've integrated into the platform. I don't see dating as anything particular. I think they wanted this to be the complete social platform for everything.
That's it. I didn't know it did that much. I don't know whether it only does that much in the US or whether I don't know, because I just don't use Facebook. It never occurred to me in a million years to go there to look for a job.
Well, I think part of the thing here is this is the thing that I think platforms like this struggle with is 90% of people, I suspect, on Facebook use it for 10% of the functionality, which is browsing your feed, posting updates, and sharing pictures. They probably don't use it. I haven't used any of that stuff.
So I think the way they pitched Marketplace is the same way they're pitching dating, which I think is interesting, is that if you go to Craigslist and you buy something and you have to meet a human in real life somewhere, you have no idea who that is or what their history is or any of the safety things or concerns around that, where with Facebook's contention is if you want to buy this widget from John O'Bacon, you can see John O'Bacon, you can see a picture of him with Jack and see his wife and see where he lives and see that he has a bunch of followers and a large history and is a human that exists, not as some random person that's trying to act like they have a large ticket item to sell and then is going to mug you. So it's an interesting pitch from that perspective. The data they need to give you that, to use a word from you, Ak, is disquieting to me personally, but that is the contention that they're making.
All right.
Interesting.
Should we spend the whole show talking about Facebook?
I do have a bunch of Google stuff, so we can move to that.
Actually, I do have one that's related to Facebook. Should we just get that out of the way?
Let's do it.
So some of you may have seen that there is a new Oculus VR headset that's come out called the Oculus Go.
This is the standalone one.
This is standalone. It's $199, and it looks, frankly, like a Google Daydream headset. It's got the fabric-y kind of case, and it looks quite comfortable to wear. Underneath it, it's got a Qualcomm Snapdragon 821, which is the 2016 flagship phone SoC of choice. There's 3 gig of RAM and either 32 gig or 64 gig. And apparently, because the hardware is kind of unimpressive in many ways, it's impressive if you got in a time machine from 1998 and came back with like 32 gig of RAM or 3 gig of RAM. But it's an old phone. But apparently it's being, quote, optimized for a VR setting. So, some of the reporting that I've seen this has basically said, because this is standalone, if this doesn't succeed as a VR headset, Oculus are arguably, one of the leaders in the market when it comes to VR. If this doesn't succeed, standalone headset, you don't need a phone, you don't need a PC, then VR is probably going to face a pretty bleak future until it gets rebooted again.
And it's reasonably priced on top of that, so I think I would agree with that contention.
It's interesting that Oculus are the leader, or one of the leaders certainly, in terms of sort of mind sharing. They're people who everyone looks at, but their stuff actually hasn't sold that well. The Samsung stuff has sold loads better. I mean, Facebook gave everyone at F8, their dev conference, one of these Oculus Go's.
One of these, yeah.
Which I suppose after saying, we're taking away all the APIs and you can't do anything and we're going to screw you in all these possible ways and we're building things that compete with all your businesses, free Oculus Go headset. And everyone went, and cheered.
Which Facebook, incidentally, did not say any of those things. But, look, there might be enough fake news. We shouldn't be part of it.
I look forward to you adding the Facebook logo to your consulting page.
No, that's fair. I mean, they did actually reopen app reviews.
They did. Yeah.
F8. So yes, no fair play. I'm being slightly unfair, but yes. But yeah, I mean, would you, our resident VR consultant, Jono, would you buy one of these? Is the idea of you feverishly defending Facebook they might send you one for free?
No.
You've got like 4 VR things, haven't you now?
No, I know. I've only got the Daydream. And to be clear, much as I might sound,
I thought you had one of the Oculus ones.
No. I actually am not really massively into VR. I think VR is interesting, but I don't have a VR setup at home. I've got the Daydream, which I haven't switched on for at least 6 months.
Oh, blimey. Okay.
And much as it might sound like I'm a Facebook apologist, I actually don't particularly give a shit about Facebook. I think this is interesting in that this is, I think, it's going to be a test of whether VR is going to work. To Jeremy's point, it's affordable. it's arguably got, as best as VR is going to have, it's got some market. It's got some of the brand with Oculus.
Yeah.
It seems like VR is doing well in gaming, at least with a PlayStation gaming rig. That seems to have sold quite well. But outside of the niche audience of VR nerds, it doesn't seem like it's really succeeded. So I'm curious to see if this actually happens.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. I suppose if you are Facebook and you've got 1.75 billion users and you've got a VR headset and it is reasonably priced and it is completely standalone and you still can't make it succeed,
right?
Does that mean VR as a concept, you think, would be...
Well, that's my thing. The tricky thing in my mind with VR is you can't assess it before you buy it, right? So if you go to Amazon and you're looking at a product, you can go and, yes, you can read reviews and whatever else, and you can generally read about the product. But if you're assessing software or hardware, you can generally see images and screenshots and things like that to get a sense of how it works. With VR, you can't do that, right? You can't, unless you've actually tried VR, you can't really explain effectively how it works and how immersive it is. And I think that's one of the problems for the consumer market is, first of all, I think people don't like having big, bulky things on their heads for extended periods of time. I think people see it as a gimmick. But secondly, I think it's very difficult to market something like that.
Yeah.
What surprises me about Facebook is they've got their main Facebook platform. They're working on Facebook Spaces, as we've obviously covered multiple times, because my prediction was not just true, but it was very true. But I'm surprised that they haven't weighed more deeply into the VR space. And this seems interesting, but it hasn't had a lot of fanfare around it. Like, it hasn't. I would have expected a major marketing campaign around something like this, and it hasn't. So it seems like a bit of an afterthought to me. I don't know.
I think the bloom has gone off the rose for VR again. And I think you're right. They'll die away. Never really made it. Never really hit sustainability. And then 10 years from now, it'll
reboot.
It'll get kicked into high gear again, and we get to live through it for the fourth time.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think VR is going to succeed until people can not have to wear big, bulky things on their heads.
Well, this is what the Intel glasses thing was for, right? Except that's... Oh, no, really?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, man. I mean, admittedly, that wasn't VR. It was just single output. It wasn't meant to take over your whole vision or anything. But I was actually interested in that.
Yeah. No, I thought it was good. I think I read... I might have dreamt this, but I think I read that it was shut down. So
blast.
Nope, they did. They killed it in April.
Oh, well, that's
it. Wasn't with us long. Should we say a small prayer?
Yes.
Let's have a minute of silence
for those glasses. For those cool glasses we are not about to receive. May the Lord make us truly thankful. Right.
Yes.
So,
okay.
Different piece of news.
Yes.
A fairly hardcore techie thing, but potentially interesting. Chrome OS. They're now in the process of building in new device stuff into the Chrome OS build, so that they can spin up Linux containers and therefore run Linux desktop applications on Chrome OS.
I think this is quite cool.
It is potentially quite cool. I wonder whether it means that Linux desktops, what's the point now? Because now you can have Chrome OS and still run all the apps. So what do you need Fedora for?
So this is
a proving ground for RHEL is what you need Fedora for.
So this Project Costini, this is so it will run a Linux desktop app in a container on Chrome OS, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it doesn't have to be a desktop app. It's just it'll run a Linux container. But unlike, say, the Whizzle for Windows, this can run GUI apps as well.
Yeah, that's exactly
I see.
That's exactly the point. Okay. Yeah, it's WSL will run a Linux container on Windows, but it's only command line stuff. They haven't done any of the GUI bits. But Chrome OS is not like that. It'll run all the GUI applications. So interesting, I thought. I mean, I've been toying with the idea of a new laptop purely on the grounds that yesterday I went off to a thing and they only had HDMI, and my poor old laptop only does VGA, and I thought, this is the universe telling me buy a new laptop, for God's sake.
I have this vision of you desperately trying to cram a HDMI cable into a parallel port on your laptop.
I actually borrowed off of one of the AV people there. He had a USB to HDMI thing, which was fab. You know, I had no idea such things existed. And to go from complete ignorance of a device to utter desire to own it in the space of 30 seconds.
Wait, you don't have a USB to HDMI adapter?
No. I've got HDMI to VGA. I haven't got VGA to HDMI, but I've got it the other way around. So I could go on.
So the video will go out of your USB port on your laptop and into the HDMI on the projector?
Yes.
Yeah. How is this mystical wisdom procured?
See, clever, isn't it? Right?
I've never heard of that.
Oh, I have a USB device that has HDMI, VGA, DisplayPort. It has all of them. You just plug it in, and whatever kind of projector you have, you plug the projector into the...
Buy one of those.
I had no idea such things even existed. I mean, to be honest with you, I could avoid this problem by just having a laptop with an HDMI port. But because I only use my laptop about once every 2 months, I don't really want to go and spend £1,000 on it.
You're not really a coffee shop dweller, are you?
No,
when you work?
I like working from here. Right, I have my machine all set up with me and everything, and that's how I want it. So I use my laptop if I go somewhere to present and things like that. That's basically all I use it for. So I'd quite like a more modern laptop, but I don't really want to spend a lot of money. And I thought, well, maybe I should just get a Chromebook then.
Yeah,
you know, they're pretty cheap.
Don't you do all your slides on your slides are all web-based as well, right?
Yeah, sometimes. I sometimes use LibreOffice. Sometimes I build web. If I'm doing I talk about a web thing, I'll quite often do web slides.
Right.
Because then I can have the slides be, interactive and actually demonstrate the thing I'm talking about. If it's
makes sense.
If it's just slides, I'll normally build it with LibreOffice or something, because then I can easily punch out a PPT if I have to send it to them or whatever. I actually did a presentation. I did a talk about Measure, which we have discussed on the show before.
Yeah, nice.
I did a talk about Measure last week, and I did the presentation entirely from my phone.
Nice.
Did the slides on Google Slides. What I actually wanted to do was present wirelessly to a thing which plugged into HDMI, but that's way more annoying than it ought to be. So I've actually got an MHL to HDMI cable, which just plugged into the bottom of my phone and then just did the presentation.
Nice.
It was actually very pleasing to see. If you've got a phone which does this, so you plug it in or you connect it to a second screen in some way, whether that's projecting to a Chromecast or an Amazon Fire Stick or something, or just with a cable with MHL, Google Slides acts the way you'd expect a presentation thing to act. It puts the presentation on the second screen, it puts the speaker notes on the screen of the phone, and you can swipe in between them and it moves.
Wow.
Yeah, yep. I was totally impressed with this.
Is there any port that can't be converted into HDMI? Like an audio port to HDMI, or
no? You don't do audio ports because no one has them on phones anymore. But yeah,
that's true.
But
actually, on this note, go ahead.
I was saying, I thought that was really interesting. There's still some issues with it, so I'm not quite at the lovely point I want to be, where I just don't have to take my laptop to do presentations, at which point I'll use it maybe twice a year. But I'm nearly there, which is something I've wanted for years. I did talk about this at OggCamp like 5 years ago.
I was going to say, on that note, someone recently asked me, actually yesterday, about presentation software that they could kind of do the slides as code and then just rebuild them every time they wanted to build them. Kind of like Terraform for slides.
Yeah.
Is there anything? I didn't have a good answer.
Magic Point can do that, or if you write HTML slides, then just something which just outputs HTML. But yeah, there are half a dozen different tools which will take, for instance, Markdown and turn them into slides.js slides.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, Magic Point is the traditional one, which has been around since about 2001.
Okay.
But now...
BC.
Just, I think it dates from the sort of time. You remember in the really old days when you had a word processor and you edited everything in fixed pitch text, and then you had like press a preview button, and it carefully built a graphical image of what your page would look like with fonts and stuff.
Right.
Magic Point's that same kind of mentality from back when you had like a keyboard overlay, a cardboard thing that you put on your keyboard to show you what all the keys did.
Magic Point has a little special place in my heart because the very first Linux user group meeting that I ever went to which was in Northampton, the first talk I ever saw someone do about open source was about Magic Point. And it was this guy in this guy's living room, and
someone used Magic Point to do a talk about Magic Point.
Yeah.
Is this like how
and then the universe imploded?
Is this like how Arch users insist on telling you that they run Arch? Same kind of thing.
So I just looked up Magic Point, seeing the splendor and wanting to see it in action. The current release of Magic Point is 1.13a, released February 14th, 2008.
It's not massively actively maintained.
Wow, it hasn't been touched for a decade? I'm amazed we still even know.
A little reticent to suggest this as a solution, but thank you.
Don't use Magic Point. Just Google for Markdown slides.js, and there's a bunch of things which will turn Markdown into.
Yeah, no, they're already using slides.js.
You do have to write Magic Point code in COBOL.
Identification division presentation. Okay, next bit of news.
Let's have a look.
I have a couple Google related ones that are
googly
interesting. The first one, which is almost hilarious enough that you would think it's April 1st, but it is not. They released another chat app, and this time it's literally called Chat. I don't even know what to say about this. So to be completely fair, I think this is in a way Google giving up and trying a completely different approach. So it's really not an app. This isn't Google Chat or Android Chat. It is really, they're convincing most of the major providers to properly support RCS, which is the next iteration of SMS.
Yeah.
So it's been like 5 years in the making, getting carriers to try to advance the standard to a point that regular phones support it. And it's been getting some interesting, I think, feedback from pundits, critics, everything in between. It's, Walt Mossberg slammed it for being insecure and controlled by carriers. It's insecure in that so is email, right? I think if you don't really understand what end-to-end encryption is, it's difficult to understand why Google would release something that is quote-unquote insecure. But iMessage is end-to-end encrypted precisely because it is a walled garden, and Apple controls all pieces, the server and the client and everything in between, where this is really more like a federated system akin to email. And for those of you who have tried to implement completely end-to-end encrypted email, it's a nightmare, and you can basically send email to yourself, or it won't work. So
I'd agree with that. There's two different aspects to this is a good thing that we might want to think about for modernness. So you've got, is it end-to-end encrypted? Is it like Signal or iMessage that preserves your privacy? Good idea. But equally, does it lock you into one provider? And refreshingly, Google are not doing that. Right. They're trying to get over. You get the impression it's like, how you say if you're talking to IRC nerds, and you'll say, but I don't use IRC because it's rubbish. It doesn't have all this stuff. And Slack or whatever, you can do all these nice things. You just paste in images. So they go, oh yeah, but IRC v3 does all that. And okay, it does, but nobody's using it. Right. RCS to me feels like that. The concept, the specs and so on have been vaguely around for ages, but nobody's supporting it. And maybe Google pushing this hard will convince carriers to adopt it. And then we're in a position where you've got iMessage-like experience on top of ordinary SMSs, rather than SMSs basically being exactly the same as they were in 1992.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting to see the different take here, because with what Apple did in a lot of ways, carriers have learned that they don't want to give that much power to an individual company, right? So I think they're dealing with Google fundamentally different than they have dealt with Apple, because they have learned a lesson there, and they don't like that Apple's able to do a lot of the things that they've been able to do.
I would like to believe they have learned that lesson, but I was talking earlier about the carriers thing and them being a smart pipe and ways to earn money and so on. As far as I can tell, if you are a carrier, It is more important that your competitors lose than that you win, right? Given the choice, if you go to carriers and say, hey, you could do
Isn't
this...
that the same outcome?
No, you say you
to
could
win, your competitors have to lose, right?
No. The point is that if you go to them and say, okay, you should all work together, and then carriers as a whole win, and you don't end up ceding a big portion of your business to completely non-carrier people, whether that's Apple or PayPal or whatever, for whatever, whether you talk about payments or messaging or whatever it is, some tech company will come along and steal all of this business from you and just treat you like dumb pipes, which you don't want to be. All you need to do is just all cooperate, and then all the operators win. Every single operator thinks, but what if we made it so you have to be on T-Mobile or Sprint or Vodafone or where you have to be on our thing, and then you get it and no one else gets it. And so everyone will then flock to us. And what happens is it dies on the vine because no one's prepared to cooperate with competing operators. And so what ends up happening is some tech company comes in and just takes the whole market. It's infuriating, and I don't get why they like it.
I think part of it, too, is Apple has proven that with the iPhone, people are willing to, given the choice between switching carriers and getting an iPhone or staying on their carrier and not getting an iPhone, they've proven they will switch carriers. I don't know that any other operator or any other handset manufacturer has that bargaining power. People won't switch carriers for an Android phone because the Android phone is already available on any carrier.
Yeah.
And because of the way that because of how Apple came up through the ecosystem, I think they have a bargaining power that no other handset manufacturer is likely to get, at least in the near future.
This feels kind of like the music industry, right? Who went, no, we're going to keep pushing DRM and make you do it. And then Apple came along and went, we're not going to do that. And so everyone went to iTunes because they could get plain MP3s or whatever. And the whole music industry lost out to a third party. This is why that didn't happen with video. Because the video people looked at the music industry and went, what ended up happening here was it ended up being no DRM because everyone just avoided us and went to iTunes. That's not happening to us. Now, it meant that we're still not in a position where videos come without DRM and ebooks are the same, but it means that the market's not as big as it could be. And this feels kind of similar.
And without derailing it towards DRM, to be fair, much as I absolutely do not like DRM in any shape or form, what happened there with DRM not succeeding in the music industry has killed the music industry. There's no money in music.
Perhaps, yes.
So it's one of those things whereby, I think it's difficult to have it both ways. Like what the music industry has taught us is you've got to have some kind of scarcity of product to be able to generate enough revenue to pay artists to keep producing music. So what's happened since then is that, DRM didn't succeed. The music industry basically can't sell records anymore. So musicians are making a pittance on Spotify. And now when you want to go and see your favorite band, it's $300 a ticket as opposed to...
I was going to say the music industry, I don't know that's dead. I mean, year over year, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and projected 18. They've never had a down year as an industry.
Well, let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. Record sales are... I mean, people aren't selling records anymore. People are not buying records anymore.
Well, I think that the industry was, for a while, predicated on artificial scarcity in a way that probably wasn't sustainable long term. So if you're looking at a very short microcosm of time, it's going in a different direction, but arguably because that was a weird time. I think the aberrant time, when we look back, will be that time, not this time.
Oh, so the argument is not that it always was sustainable and now it's being killed. It's that it never was, apart from the little bit where we grew up.
Right.
Well, I think it was. I would argue that it was sustainable without the internet, right? So when you have mass distribution and the ability for people to make copies of things easily, unless you can restrict people making copies easily, then media, you like the music industry was dependent on scarcity. Like if you want an album, you have to go and buy the album or listen to it on the radio. And
it's still dependent on scarcity. It's just that what is scarce has changed from a piece of vinyl or a piece of plastic turned into a cassette to seeing the show or band merchandise. The scarcity is just shift to something that's actually scarce in real life, not something that was artificially scarce for a small amount of time.
How was it artificially scarce beforehand?
Well, because there weren't 1 billion copies of a vinyl record. I mean, they weren't piled up on street corners that anyone could go and take, but then a bloke with a bat stopped you from doing that. There weren't that many copies of a vinyl record because each one cost money to produce.
So I'm agreeing with you that the internet is what changed things, but the internet made something that was physically scarce into something that isn't, and the industry had to pivot based on that fact.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying is that the music industry is dependent on physical scarcity. The internet broke that, and because the music industry, that was really their primary source of revenue was record sales. Now it's still physical scarcity. It's going to see bands and selling people merchandise, and now gigs cost $200 a ticket.
Yeah,
so.
No, that's fair.
But yeah, anyway, like I said, I didn't want to derail it too much, but I just think it's interesting. Like I was, as much as anyone, lobbying for no DRM, but these things can have unintended consequences.
I think even looking back on it now, yes, I was just as much as you, but I think revisiting the way I thought, going back and explaining this to my 2002 era self would be a challenge. But I think it's almost not that I disagree with DRM. It's that I don't like the fact that every single music label who implemented it also thought, we can do more than just enforce artificial scarcity with this. We can also push a bunch of business models. So instead of just going, you've got a piece of music, but you can't copy it and give it to your mates, which is what we want, they also went, and now you can only play it on Sony phones, and now you can only play it in between 9 p.m. and 12 p.m. And now you can only play it 6 times or something. It's ways of taking the fact that you've developed this scarcity and building new repressive models of business that they didn't have before.
Well, I think this gets back to your carrier thing, though, where if everyone would have worked together for a common standard that worked in that way, it might have worked, but everyone wanted their own fiefdom, and we're willing to blow up the whole thing as opposed to work together, which seems like a pretty common trend in our industry.
But I don't even think that would have worked because, I mean, I would argue that the bullet in the brain of the music industry was illegal MP3 file sharing, right? With what was that thing called?
Napster.
Kazaa.
Oh,
Kazaa, yeah.
Remember that?
I think what Stuart is getting at, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Stuart, is that a lot of piracy, I think, was a result of I would have paid $1 for a song if I could have played it on all of my personal devices.
That's true.
And never have given it to anyone else.
Yeah,
but that would have required a massive amount of different disparate companies working together.
That's interesting.
There were tons of times where I would have happily paid.
Like, what would have happened if Spotify came out 10 years earlier?
Yeah, it would have been industry changing.
That's a fascinating thought, yeah.
There wouldn't have been enough bandwidth is the problem.
That's true. Certainly not in Buffalo.
So I've got this brilliant new thing called Spotify, and I press play, and then it says buffering for 15 minutes, and then it plays something. It would be Real Player. It's like, why wouldn't Netflix launch on Real Player? And to ask the question is to answer it.
that version of Spotify, you had to manually decode each bit of the song, and then it's not a seamless experience, I suppose.
Knowing the word decode is making you show your age, Gus.
Yeah, all right, granddad.
All right, well.
All right.
So while we're on the topic of carriers, we want to discuss the Sprint T-Mobile mergers. Ak, you mentioned them both in the previous news item.
I did, but I don't know much about it. So I don't really understand. I barely understand how carriers work here in the UK. I find it really difficult to even understand the landscape in the US.
Let's cover this one quickly then. So basically what it is now is, and it's interesting to see how different people are kind of analyzing this one. Right now there's Verizon, which is by far and away number one. There's AT&T, which isn't super far behind, but pretty far behind. And then there's T-Mobile, which is scrappy and doing some really cool, interesting things, but way, 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 way behind. And Sprint, which is way, way, way behind. My contention here is not that the industry is going from 4 to 3. My contention is that the industry is going from 2 to 3, because I don't think T-Mobile and Sprint were... T-Mobile maybe, but Sprint by itself was not viable long term. With the shift to 5G, they did not have the resources to allocate to succeed in any meaningful way. Where I think there's now 3 very legitimate players if the merger goes through.
Oh, so this is like you've got Avis and Hertz renting cars, and then the third and fourth people who you've never heard of get together, and then they're as big as Avis and Hertz are.
So T-Mobile and Sprint are interesting in that you've heard of them. They're large companies, but they're just not effectively able to compete at the same level. And I think the one thing that's been interesting to watch with T-Mobile is they actually haven't. They've done a ton of cool things around pricing. They've really shaken up the industry. It has not resulted in them getting a ton of market share. They've only, in that time period, gone up about 3%. What they've been able to do is kill the margins for AT&T and Verizon. So they put pricing pressure on the entire market without absorbing a lot of that market, which I think is interesting.
Right, okay. I mean, that's standard oligopoly, or standard oligopoly physics, right?
They've been surprisingly effective at it in a fairly short time period, I think, is more what's been interesting to watch.
What do you guys use?
I have T-Mobile.
T-Mobile. Yep.
It seems to me that anyone in the U.S. who travels a lot has T-Mobile because it works in every country on the planet except for like 6 with no extra charge. So if I go to the UK, my phone just works.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh,
for data. We're with them somewhat historically because Erica actually opened up the first. She used to run T-Mobile.
I know what you're with T-Mobile.
Yeah. So we've just ended up sticking with them. But I have to say, I like what T-Mobile are doing. I think they're doing some really interesting stuff. I like how they're shaking things up, and I like their CEO. So, but I don't really know much about this. All I know is that this is going to likely complete next year. So as long as there's no, pushback, this should actually go through next year. So
I think a lot of it too is for the upcoming 5G upgrade because it's a very high frequency. So I don't know if like the way phone signals kind of work is the low frequencies go through buildings and travel much further, but they don't have as much bandwidth. Very high frequencies have a ton of bandwidth, but don't travel through very well at all. A lot of the carriers are putting 5G on super high frequency bandwidth, super high frequencies, and then going with a bunch of terrestrial antennas, which is super. It requires a super large capital outlay to move forward with. So I think that's why Verizon and AT&T would have been able to compete at a more effective level because they have the cash.
Oh, right. Okay, so the point being that you've basically got to put an antenna on every street corner, for which you need tons of money. I mean, ignore the exact details. Wasn't WiMAX meant to come along and solve all this for us?
It was. So what else do we got?
Right.
I'm so bored about this topic now. I can't go on.
What else do we got?
That was good though. It was very interesting.
Shut up.
Should we spend the whole show talking about T-Mobile and Sprint? I have a funny one that I saw recently.
Yes, I mean, you know how local news always ends on, the little amusing stories? We should have a couple of amusing stories before we end.
Yeah, so I actually, I've talked about this previously in the show. I'm a fan of this guy called Joe Rogan, who's a stand-up comedian. He has a podcast called the Joe Rogan Podcast, or the Joe Rogan Experience. One of the things I like about this is that he has people on this show who are on for like 4 hour. They're like 4 hour interviews. They're going in real levels of depth. And so consequently, YouTube tends to recommend a lot of Joe Rogan videos to me. And one of the things that he was talking about was an episode of a podcast called Radio Lab, which I've heard of. I've never listened to. And apparently it's a really good podcast. And he was talking about how sharing this story. This is actually from last year. So this is not new news. This is something that I just heard about yesterday. So Shia LeBoeuf, the Hollywood actor, is a bit weird. And
Yes.
he's been doing all kinds of weird art installation type stuff. And last year, he put a flag up in an unknown location, and it said, "He will not divide us" on this flag. I'm presuming it's referring to Trump. So he stuck this flag up and basically set up a live stream that just filmed this flag and said it was going to be filmed for like a year or something like that. So it's kind of funny. So 4chan, right? This is, some of you will already be able to see where this is going because I've just said the words 4chan. But 4chan, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's kind of like Reddit, but filled with trolls. It's completely anonymous. 4chan decided that they were going to play a game of capture the flag. So what they did is they apparently they started like working together, trying to figure out where this location was. And they first of all started looking at from the video feed like where stars were at particular times of the night, so they could try and identify which part of the planet the flag was in. And then they started looking at flight paths and assessing planes that were going over the top of it. And they went into this crazy level of detail, and then eventually they found this flag, and they replaced it with like a freaking "Make America Great Again" hat or something like that. But it was like an unparalleled level of trolling. And you know, I'm not a fan of 4chan. I don't go to 4chan. There's a lot of like bigotry and racism stuff like that on 4chan. But I have to say, I did kind of find this whole little story kind of amusing. How
the amount of effort people are willing to put into trolling sometimes absolutely astounds me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing which amazes me about that, do you remember Andrew Sullivan, political commentator guy?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
he used to do a newsletter called The Dish, and it came out. It was once a month or once a week.
Hang on, is Andrew Sullivan is that the gay guy? Is that
yeah,
what I'm thinking
yeah,
of?
I think he was gay. Yeah,
yeah. I love that guy. Yeah.
So I was a subscriber to The Dish, and he used to have a thing in there called View from Your Window. And what would happen is someone would just take a picture out of just some random window somewhere and then send it in. And they pick one and put it up. And then the goal was to work out where the picture was taken from.
Right.
And every week they'd say, this is where the view was and these are the people who got it right. And then they'd do another one every week or every month or whatever it was. And I was always amazed at how many people would say, okay, I worked out from this and from the fact that you can see this thing over here, but we're below the horizon and we must be up here. And they'd send in a thing saying, I believe this picture was taken from this window in this hotel on this street in this town. You think, how are you working this out? It's mad.
Yeah, it is mad.
I mean, you can imagine they started off with, and the picture was someone out of their hotel window taking a picture of the Sydney Opera House, at which point it's not that difficult. But it's just some random street.
Yeah,
in Guadalajara or something. You're like, how do you know this?
I echo Jeremy's point. When I was listening to this story, I was like, why would anyone go to this level of attention, like this level of effort to do this? I've never quite understood trolling. I've never understood why people intentionally want to go out and fuck with people, right? And the thing that I've discovered I've been doing some thinking about this recently, and I was doing some reading up about like why people troll, is that a big chunk of it is it's almost like stand-up for people. It's like stand-up comedy for people. They construct trolling in such a way that it gets a certain type of rise out of people, in the same way that stand-up comedians will weave a story in a certain way that gets a certain type of laugh out of people. And I never really realized just how. I never really realized just what level of depth people will go to troll people.
It is bonkers.
I think it's mind blowing. I mean, it's one thing to go on a message board and talk shit about people, but to actually, triangulate the location of a hidden flag somewhere.
It is quite startling.
What's next?
I have an amusing little story, which is actually a salutary tale in why you should understand the web properly before using it. Right? Some bloke wrote his own little web UI to open his garage door. Right? So he could from his phone just pull up the web page and hit on his phone when he was in the car, hit the button, and it would open the garage door so we could drive the car in, right? Quite cool little weaving together a few bits of technology, Internet of Things,
Seems
blah,
reasonable.
blah, blah. Yeah. The problem was, right, and slight web nerdery here, you're supposed to use post requests for that kind of thing because you're making a change. He just used a get request. So just the browser just going to the, garage/open page made it open. Okay?
Right.
You're not really supposed to do that, but you think, well, why is that important?
No, you're not.
This is why it's important. Safari noticed he went to that page a lot and so put it in his favourites. And then his favourites got synced to all his devices with iCloud, and then favourites show up on the new tab page. So every time he opened a new tab on his iPhone, on his MacBook, whatever, his garage door opened. Right.
That is excellent.
You must be this tall to ride HTTP, in my opinion. So beware if you're building your own thing. But yeah, he was kind of, I knew that was important. I should have really cared about that, shouldn't I? So, lol, good effort, that bloke.
If only he had used Google's new .app domain.
Well, there it is. I saw that being released, yes. Because at first I thought, here's a new thing for new apps and it's on the web. And I thought, wow, are they going to restrict it to just be PWAs? That'd be brilliant. And it's like, no, it's just a domain that anyone can register in.
Yeah.
I think we might be over with this show. I think we're about finished.
Yep.
So this has been the bumper of the bumper news segments. As usual, people go and let us know what you think. You can go to community.badvoltage.org. You can join our forum, or you can go to our Slack channel. Everything's linked from the website. So
since this was a bumper news section, why don't we'll try a new thing where if you're listening to this show and you want the three of us to discuss a news item, drop it into the thread and we'll give you feedback on what we think of that news item.
Yeah.
There you go.
Interesting. I like it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Wicked.
Okay, that was Bad
Over
Voltage. Thank you very much.